documentaries that you have. And I think the most recent one that was aired was on mental health as well. This morning, one of the news items I heard about Okomfo Kwade also going through some mental health challenges.
Yeah.
So the point I want to make with all of this in the introduction is that mental health disorders are more common than we care to admit. Indeed, in 2019, 1 in every 8 people, or 970 million people around the world were living with a mental health disorder. So, Kwame, those are the actual statistics. 1 in every 8. And this data was collected in 2019, or 970 million people around the world living with a mental health disorder. And anxiety and depressive disorders were the most common of these mental health disorders. And we'll come to talk about them in a bit. Many people around the world experience stigma, discrimination, and violations of human rights because they suffer one mental health disorder or the other.
Okay.
So, Kwame, what is mental health? The WHO describes mental health as a state of well-being in which the individual realizes his or her abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and can contribute to his or her community. So, Kwame, we are all expected to realize our full potential. We are all expected to be able to cope with the normal stresses of life. We are all expected to be very productive and contribute to our society or to our communities positively. So that is what mental health is. It encompasses emotional, psychological, and social well-being. Your mental health will influence your cognition. And when we talk about cognition, we are talking about the process of acquiring knowledge and understanding through thought, experience, and the senses. So cognition is mental action. So your mental health will influence your cognition. It influences your perception, your ability to become aware of things using the senses. And what we know about the 5 senses, right?
Right.
Vision, smell, taste, touch, and hearing. Right. And then your mental health will also influence your behavior. So this is why mental health is important. It influences your behavior, it influences how you perceive your environment, and it also influences your cognition, your mental capacity. So what then constitutes a mental health disorder? Now that we know what mental health is, what then constitutes a mental health disorder? Whenever there is a clinically significant disturbance in an individual's mental action or cognition, emotional regulation, or behavior, then the umbrella term mental health disorder can be used. So, Kwame, I take that again. Whenever there is a significant disturbance in an individual's ability to think, emotional regulation, or behavior, then we would apply the umbrella term mental health disorder. In medicine, we have different classification systems, or we have a universal classification system. We call it the ICD, International Classification of Disease. And mental health disorders are classified or are grouped as follows, or have the following types. So, Kwame, when we say a mental health disorder, it is not a specific diagnosis. It's an umbrella term. And under that umbrella, these are the various or the individual diagnostic entities that one would find. Remember in my introduction, I mentioned that the commonest mental health disorders as at 2019 were anxiety and depressive disorders. So let's start with that. Number one, anxiety disorders. Anxiety disorders are characterized by excessive fear and worry and related behavioral disturbances. So individuals with anxiety disorders, they always have a fear that something is going to happen, something untoward is going to happen. They worry too much. And they have, because of these two things, they have what we call behavioral disturbances. They act that fear out. They act out that worry. And if you observe them, you would find that their behavior is not quite what you expect. So that is what an anxiety disorder is. Okay. Excessive fear and worry. There are several kinds of anxiety disorders. Generalized anxiety disorder, where you have excessive worry. There's something we call a panic disorder, where the individual gets panic attacks. I mean, panic attack is an extreme, sudden fear of something. It could be an object or it could be a situation. It could be an animal. But the level of fear that they have physical manifestations or symptoms of that fear. You can also have a social anxiety disorder, which is characterized by excessive fear in social situations. Social situations where you and I will find very comfortable, such individuals, no way. So they never go out and interact in groups. There's also something we call separation anxiety disorder, which is characterized by excessive fear or anxiety about separation from those individuals to whom the person has a deep emotional bond. So these are the main categories of it. Number two, we have depression. And Kwame, I think most people would be familiar with this diagnostic or mental health disorder called depression. Depression is different from the usual mood fluctuations and short-lived emotional responses to everyday life challenges. So, Kwame, life will throw challenges at us every now and then. We will get a curveball thrown at us. And you will have what we call short-lived emotional responses. Your mood is depressed, yes, because you went for an interview today, things didn't go well. We expect that, yes, your mood will be depressed. Arsenal didn't win the league title at the very last minute, so Arsenal fans, they will have what we call a short-lived emotional response.
Oh.
As for Man U fans and Chelsea fans, maybe they are the ones who get there. Kwame, you people finish 6, so you are okay.
Leave it at Arsenal fans.
Right. So during the depressive episode, the person experiences a depressed mood. And when we talk about a depressed mood, it's a feeling of sadness. They are very irritable, or there's this emptiness about your life. There is loss of pleasure or interest in activities that would normally give you pleasure for most of the day, nearly every day, for at least 2 weeks. I mean, I take that time frame again. For most of the day, nearly every day, for at least 2 weeks. So, if you know any Arsenal fans, let's start observing them and see whether after 2 weeks we can diagnose them or not. Several other symptoms are also present, which may include poor concentration, feeling of excessive guilt, low self-worth, hopelessness about the future, thoughts about dying, or actual attempts at self-harm, including suicide, disrupted sleep, changes in appetite or weight, and feeling especially tired or low in energy. All these things may be signs that an individual is experiencing depression. And the timeline is 2 weeks, and it must be nearly every day. And on the days you are feeling this way, it must be for most parts of the day. Third mental health disorder I want to briefly talk about is what we call a bipolar disorder. People with bipolar disorders experience alternating depressive episodes with what we also call periods of manic symptoms. So that is why we call it bipolar, two poles of emotions. One is mania, where when you are over the top, they are really, really happy, over the top. So I saw some pictures of some of the Man City players coming out of clubs at around 4 a.m. And when you see their eyes, then you know that, yes, energy, so that's mania, when you are at one end of extreme happiness. And then the other is the depression. So bipolar, and the individual is experiencing alternating depressive episodes with periods of manic symptoms. So during the depressive episodes, they experience the symptoms I spoke about earlier. And then the manic symptoms, the mania, may include euphoria or irritability. They have increased activity or energy. And other symptoms such as increased talkativeness, racing thoughts. I mean, you speak with them for 1 hour, they will give you 20 different ideas about how to turn your business around. 1 hour. So they have racing thoughts. They don't finish with one thought and then another one comes. They're fired up. Increased self-esteem. They think they are going to conquer the world. You talk to them. So sometimes I listen to some of these motivational speakers who tell you to stand in front of a lion, don't run, if a lion is coming at you, and all of those things. And then you wonder, do they have a little bit of mania in them? Yes, increased self-esteem, decreased need for sleep. Unfortunately, they also demonstrate what we call impulsive, reckless behavior. Impulsive, reckless behavior. So these are the symptoms of mania. And one moment, this person is showing all of these hyperactivity situations, and then the next moment, they're depressed. We'll call this a bipolar disorder. Next up is what we call post-traumatic stress disorder. Post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. PTSD. And I mean, this is also making the rounds these days. PTSD may develop following exposure to an extremely threatening or horrific event or series of events. And Kwame, here I want to make a point, and I know that because this is Joy FM, we've got significant duty bearers in this country listening in. Our road traffic accident mortality rate and morbidity rate is absolutely horrifying. And it has been horrifying for 20 plus years. Go back and look at the statistics from the year 2000. We lose more than 2,000 lives on the roads every year since the year 2000. Absolutely unacceptable, but every year it happens. 12,000 plus people are maimed and have horrible injuries, including amputated limbs, because of road traffic accidents. It is a horrifying experience when you see how badly mangled some of these vehicles are. But can we just stop for a moment and think about those who survive these accidents and how traumatized they are. That is exactly what post-traumatic stress disorder is about. How many of them receive psychological counseling after these road traffic accidents? Who is making that available to them? I'm sorry to say, nobody. We really, really need to do something about it. So a lot of people are suffering quietly. So I want everybody out there to think about any threatening or horrific event or series of events that you've experienced. And it is very, very possible that in re-experiencing that traumatic event or events in the present, meaning you may have some intrusive memories, flashbacks, or nightmares. You may also have what we call avoidance of thoughts and memories of the events, avoidance of activities or situations or people reminiscent of the event. So, Kwame, you see somebody's been involved in a road traffic accident and they are very, very reluctant to go out and board a bus for any journey. They hear the horn of a vehicle and they are absolutely terrified by that. So that is post-traumatic stress disorder. I'm sorry, it's one of those diagnoses that we do not make in this country, but there are so many terrifying and traumatic situations that we encounter, or a lot of people encounter in this country. Next up, I want to talk about schizophrenia. So schizophrenia is characterized by significant impairments in perception. So, Kwame, perception is how you become aware of something using the senses. So, the sense of vision, sense of hearing, very, very common senses that we use every day, right? So, when you have impairments in perception, for example, you develop what we call hallucinations, and you would have visual hallucinations. You see things that are not there. You will have auditory hallucinations. You will hear voices. Those voices may be conversational voices. Those voices may be instructive. Go and stab somebody. And it happens. You will talk to the police prosecutors, and sometimes we get orders from the court asking for psychiatric evaluation of patients, and some people say, oh, this person has been left off on a technicality. Oh, no. It's not a technicality. The doctors are not cooking up anything. Sometimes some individuals may have mood disorders, and they may have psychotic symptoms, and the very common one is something we call schizophrenia. Now, the next one is something that most people don't consider as a disorder. Kwame says eating disorder. Eating disorders. So some people have this fear about their body weight and shape. And they develop, and they're so occupied with the type of food that they eat. They want to be a size 10 or a size 8. So they develop something we call anorexia nervosa, where they will stay away from food. They're literally starving themselves because they've got this morbid fear of putting on weight. So they are very, very skinny. Then there's also something we call bulimia nervosa. These ones, they can't stay away from the food. Although they have a fear and great concerns about their body weight and shape, so they will eat. But they will probably stick their finger down their throat so that they can throw up the food. So they will eat and throw up deliberately. So there are quite a number of eating disorders as well. Lastly, I want to talk about disruptive behavior or dissocial disorders. Again, it's one of the things we don't recognize. But in our country here in Ghana, especially when we look at children and teenagers, we say, we think that the corporal punishment will set the child right. So disruptive behavior and the social disorders are characterized by persistent behavior problems. I mean, the word there is persistent, all right? Behavior problems. Look, we've all been children before. Every now and then our parents were not quite happy with some of the things that, some of the stunts and the shenanigans that we put up. That's what we are talking about. We're talking about persistent behavior problems, such as persistently defiant or disobedience to others. And these individuals who have these social disorders, they persistently violate the basic rights of others. They don't follow norms, rules, or laws. Right. All right? And this is what we'll call the disruptive behavior in the social disorders. Yeah, I said lastly, neurodevelopmental disorders. So these are disorders of behavior and cognition, which arise during the developmental period of children. So as children grow, we expect them to be able to develop speech, be able to process things, and we'll call that growing or become mature. Okay. So you are looking at motor skills, language skills, intellectual skills, and unfortunately, children with things like attention deficit hyperactive disorders, autism spectrum disorders, we will classify these things as neurodevelopmental disorders. Okay. So, Kwame, there you have it. These are that's a bird's eye view, and that's what I've done today. I've given our audience a bird's eye view of what constitutes mental health disorder. Okay. So, Kwame, what do you have?
Well, I'm just wondering that who's really at risk of developing a mental disorder, and really, are there things that we can do to minimize the risk of developing a mental health disorder?
Right. So, at any one time, a diverse set of individual, family, community, and structural factors may combine to protect or undermine or adversely affect one's mental health. Although most of us are resilient to all of these different factors I talk about, but people who are particularly exposed to adverse circumstances, including poverty. So, Kwame, poverty is an adverse life circumstance. Violence, disability, people who are subjected to inequality. When we talk about these things, sometimes when you live in Ghana, you don't really see it. But you can travel outside of this country, outside of this continent, and you can really, really feel that you are a second-class citizen. And Kwame, I'm sure you've had that experience before, where you are made to feel unequal with others. So these are the classification. The at-risk groups are people who are exposed to adverse life circumstances, traumatizing situations. Also, we've also realized that those with a rich family history of a mental health disorder, then that also increases your risk. So there are individual psychological and biological factors. The way we also bring up individuals, give them what we call coping mechanisms, emotional skills, is also very, very important. As my father would always say, you must have shock absorbers in life. But then there are also genetic factors. But I mean, the most important thing we need to do is the ability to recognize that something is not quite right. Unfortunately, there is an overconcentration on physical health issues to the detriment of mental health and social health issues. So the first thing is the identification. And once we identify, you have a suspicion that this may be a mental health disorder. Look, don't try anything. Just go talk to the qualified medical doctor. You don't necessarily even need a psychiatrist or a psychologist. Your family physician is the first point of call. Reach out to them, present whatever it is. You should not think that you want to wait until you find out the person is walking the street naked or putting up a very bizarre behavior before you seek help. Then the rest of the help can be rolled out. Okay. Mental health disorders are very, very treatable.
Great. Now that you've given us quite some in-depth information about mental health disorders, share with us, for anybody who want to reach out to you and probably get their issue sorted, how we can reach out to you.
Right, Kwame. So we've got a very, very solid team here at Medical's Hospital when it comes to mental health disorders. So reach out to us, 0501 477 340. 0501 477 340. We've got a clinical psychologist, a psychiatrist, and they will be more than willing to help us with any issue across the different age categories.
Wow.
Kwame.
Thank you so much. I'm grateful. This is some good information. God bless you. Yeah?
You're welcome.
All right. Dr. Osafo is the CEO of Medicast Hospital, Mampo Ekiapim, Medina Firestone, and East Legon Hills. And we'll be talking about mental health. There's the Purple Month. Stay tuned into Joy FM.